Watch where you're going, pretty lady. The voice held a swagger that hadn't been earned. Abigail glanced up. A Navy petty officer, his rank visible on his sleeve, stood blocking her way with two of his buddies. A smirk twisted his lips. He had deliberately stepped right in front of her. He bumped her, then chuckled. It wasn't a friendly sound, it was a mocking, grating noise. His friends joined in, their eyes moving over her as if she were a piece of misplaced furniture. Abigail didn't react. No gasp, no flinch, no sharp comeback. Her body stayed perfectly still. She stood calmly, but firmly rooted. Her gaze was steady, her blue eyes clear and observant. In that moment she wasn't just a civilian in a dining hall. She was sizing up a threat. She noted his height, his build, his posture, and the slight wobble that suggested he was either overly confident or had stopped for drinks before dinner. She saw the careless cruelty in his friend's eyes, the boredom of men looking for trouble. "You made a mess," she said, her voice even and quiet, showing no fear or anger. It was simply a statement of fact. The petty officer's smirk widened. He seemed to enjoy this. "Looks that way. Maybe you should clean it up. Then again, this area is for service members. You seem a bit lost. Are you here with your husband?" One of his friends leaned in, adding, "Yeah, is he an officer? Maybe he can get you into the good dining hall next time." Abigail ignored the second sailor, keeping her attention on the leader. "I'm here to eat," she stated. "I'd appreciate it if you'd step aside so I can get another tray." The petty officer, Davies, as his name tag showed, moved a half-step closer, invading her personal space. The scent of old coffee mixed with cheap cologne hit her. He was trying to scare her, using his size and uniform like a weapon. It was a familiar trick, one she'd witnessed countless times in dusty foreign markets and busy bars back home. It was almost dull. "I don't think so," Davies said, his voice dropping into a demeaning drawl. "We have rules here. We can't just have anyone walking in off the street. Let me see your ID." He held out his hand, palm up, demanding it. It was a clear show of power. He wasn't asking. He was giving an order. Abigail reached into the simple canvas bag at her side and took out her wallet, pulling out a laminated card. She held it for him to see, but didn't place it in his waiting hand. He squinted at it, his lip curling in disgust. "A contractor ID. What do you do? File papers for some supply clerk. That doesn't give you full access, especially not during busy meal times. This is for the warfighters." He emphasized the last word with a light poke to her shoulder. It was meant to belittle her, to physically highlight his sneering tone. The small contact caused a ripple through the background noise of the mess hall. A few nearby conversations died out. The usual quiet flow of a military dining facility, people moving with purpose, eating quickly, avoiding eye contact, was broken. A few heads turned. Abigail's steady gaze didn't waver. "I'm authorized to be here," she repeated, her words still holding that unsettling calm. "Now, if you'll move." Davies seemed to gain energy from her composure, mistaking it for weakness. His irritation grew. She wasn't reacting as he wanted. She wasn't getting upset or tearful. She wasn't bowing to him. He decided to push harder. "I'm not moving until I'm sure you're not a security risk," he said, his voice rising slightly, drawing more attention. He was performing now, playing to his two friends and the few others who were openly watching. "For all I know, this ID is fake. We get family members trying this all the time, trying to get a free meal." He reached out and snatched the ID from her fingers. The plastic bent under his tight grip. He held it close to his face, examining every detail as if he were an expert faker. "Carter, Abigail," he read aloud, his voice dripping with mockery. "Says here you're cleared for all facilities. I find that hard to believe." He looked from the photo on the card to her face. "You don't look like you belong here." His friends snorted in agreement. They had moved closer, forming a loose, threatening circle around her. To anyone watching, it was three uniformed sailors cornering a civilian woman. The unfairness of it hung in the air, thick and ugly. The pressure on her arm felt familiar. It was the grip of a man who believed he was in charge, who thought his strength and uniform gave him power over this place, over her. As his fingers tightened, something clicked in Abigail's mind. The bright, noisy mess hall blurred. Her eyes dropped for a split second to her canvas bag on the floor beside her. Pinned to the rough cloth was a small plain ribbon, barely an inch long, with simple navy blue, gold, and scarlet stripes. The smell of overcooked green beans vanished, replaced by the sharp metallic tang of gunpowder and hot dust. The clatter of trays became the deafening, instant crack of an IED explosion just feet from her vehicle's front tire. She felt the ghost weight of her flak jacket and helmet, the 70 pounds of gear that had been a second skin for a year. Her hand twitched, her muscle memory reaching for the familiar grip of her M4 rifle. She could taste the grit of Fallujah sand in her teeth, see the blinding white sun glinting off a rooftop a quarter-mile away. She remembered the split-second decision to fire back while her ears rang, the urgent shout to check for wounded, the careful, fierce grace of clearing a building room by room. That small ribbon wasn't just an award, it was a scar, a memory forged in a furnace of noise, fear, and absolute clarity. The sailor's grip was nothing. His laughter was silent. This wasn't a threat. It was an annoyance. She brought her focus back to the present. The pressure on her arm remained. Her calm wasn't a choice. It was a deeply ingrained response. Across the large mess hall, at a long table with a dozen Marines, Gunnery Sergeant Miller slowly ate a piece of dried chicken. He was a man in his late 30s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from rock and left in the sun. He had been dimly aware of the noise, the loud voices of the Navy sailors, and had dismissed it as typical rival service silliness. But the argument wasn't fading, it was growing. "Look at those squids," a young lance corporal at his table muttered. "Picking on a civilian." Gunny Miller's eyes narrowed. He didn't like it. There was an ugliness to it that turned his stomach. He watched the woman. He noticed her posture, shoulders back, head up, feet firmly planted. It was subtle, but it was there. A stillness that didn't belong to a civilian. He'd seen that exact stance 1,000 times before, in Marines facing a review board, in Marines about to go on patrol, in Marines holding a line that was about to break. Then he saw the sailor, Davies, snatch her ID. Miller's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. That was too far, an abuse of power, real or imagined. He was about to stand up to use his own strong presence to end the foolishness, when the sailor grabbed the woman's arm. As he did, her bag on the floor shifted. The overhead fluorescent lights caught the small, colorful ribbon pinned to the strap. Gunny Miller froze. Every Marine, from the newest recruit to the most experienced officer, knows the importance of award. They know the difference between a peacetime service medal and something earned when the bullets fly. Miller's eyes locked onto the small pin. He knew every thread, every color, the navy blue, gold, and scarlet of the combat action ribbon. The car, not a medal for simply being in a war zone, but an award for actively fighting with or being fought by the enemy. It was a mark of honor worn by infantry, by true warriors, and it was on her bag. His blood first ran cold, then burned with a fierce protective anger. He looked back at her face, truly seeing her this time. Beyond the civilian clothes and long blonde hair, he searched his memory, digging through years of deployments, training, and faces seen in passing. The name on the sailor's lips, Carter, was the last piece of the puzzle. It clicked into place with the sound of a rifle bolt chambering around. Sergeant Carter, Abby, the combat engineer who had served with the 3rd Battalion during the second push into the city, the one who could set up a breaching charge with a surgeon's care and handle a machine gun like she was born with it, the one the infantry called the Dozer, because she never ever took a single step back. A low growl rumbled in Miller's chest. He slowly, carefully put his fork down. His younger Marines watched him, their own faces growing serious as they sensed their leader's mood. "Stay put," he ordered them, his voice a low whisper. "Don't move, but watch." He pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't call the military police or base security. That was too slow, too impersonal. This needed a different approach. He scrolled through his contacts and found the number he was looking for. He didn't call. He sent a text, his thumb moving with furious speed.
"Sir Gunny Miller, you will not believe who Petty Officer Davies is harassing at the Trident Mess Hall right now. It's Sergeant Carter, the Dozer. They just laid hands on her." He hit send. The message flew across the base, a digital signal cutting through the evening. Now the clock was ticking. Help wasn't just on the way, it was already here.
In a quiet, air-conditioned office in the Marine Expeditionary Force Headquarters building, a mile away, Major Evan Phillips was finishing the last of a huge stack of routine paperwork. His day was almost done. He was thinking about a cold beer and a peaceful evening when his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen, saw it was from Gunny Miller, and his brow furrowed. Miller wasn't one for casual talk. He read the text once, then a second time. Sergeant Carter, the Dozer. The name hit him like a physical punch. It took him a moment to place it, to connect the legendary nickname to a face. He spun in his chair and typed Carter A into the military personnel database. Her file appeared instantly. He clicked it open. The service photo showed a much younger woman, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun under her Marine cover. Her face was stern, her eyes impossibly old. He scanned the screen, his own breath catching. Sergeant Abigail Carter, Military Occupation Specialty 1371, Combat Engineer, 2 deployments. He scrolled down to her awards and medals. The list was long. Purple Heart, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, with a V for Valor. Combat Action Ribbon, Presidential Unit Citation, Good Conduct Medals, Expert Rifle and Pistol Badges. But it was the summary for the Commendation Medal that made him stop. When her lead vehicle was struck by a remotely detonated IED, Sergeant Carter, despite suffering a concussion and shrapnel wounds to her left arm and shoulder, immediately exited the disabled vehicle under heavy enemy fire with complete disregard for her own safety. She provided covering fire, allowing her wounded vehicle commander to be pulled to safety. She then proceeded to pull the unconscious driver from the burning wreckage and drag him 30 meters to cover, returning fire throughout the entire action. Major Phillips read on, his knuckles white as he gripped his mouse. He remembered the reports from that battle. It had been a brutal, chaotic fight, and she had been right in the middle of it. He saw her past roles listed: platoon sergeant, chief demolitions expert, weapons and tactics instructor. She had been a legend, a quiet, humble non-commissioned officer respected and slightly feared by Marines twice her size. And now she was retired, working as a civilian contractor on his base. A cold, precise anger settled over him. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. He grabbed his cover from his desk. As he stormed out of his office, he was already dialing his phone. "Master Sergeant," he said, his voice sharp and cold. "My vehicle front of the building. Now." Back in the mess hall, Davies was puffed up with his own perceived authority. Abigail's continued silence, to him, was an admission of guilt. He had won. He held up her ID between his thumb and forefinger, waving it at her like a trophy. "You know, I'm feeling generous," he announced to the room, which had grown strangely quiet. "I'm not going to call the MPs just yet, but you and I are going to take a walk, and you're going to explain to my Master Chief exactly how you got this ID. Impersonating a federal contractor is a serious offense. We could have you banned from this base permanently." He chuckled again, that same ugly, grating sound. "Maybe you'll think twice next time you try to cheat for a free dinner." That was the final step too far. The last arrogant insult hung in the still air. And then came a sound. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a crack. It was the simple, clear scrape of a wooden chair leg against the linoleum floor. Across the room, Gunnery Sergeant Miller pushed his chair back and stood. He didn't look at the sailors. He looked straight at Abigail. He rose to his full height, his broad shoulders squared, his hands relaxed at his sides. He just stood, a silent, unmoving statue of defiance. A moment later, the young lance corporal at his table stood up, then the corporal next to him, then the sergeant. Within 5 seconds, all 12 Marines at Miller's table were on their feet, standing in silent, united judgment. The sound spread outwards. The next table, another group of Marines, saw what was happening. Chairs scraped, they stood, then another table, and another. It was a wave of quiet, coordinated movement, spreading through the huge hall. The low hum of conversation had completely stopped. The only sounds were the scrape of chair legs and the soft thud of dozens of boots planting firmly on the floor. One by one, every Marine in the mess hall rose to their feet. Young privates first class with fresh haircuts, battle-hardened staff sergeants with many service stripes, A pair of captains in the corner quietly put down their forks and stood together. An entire section of the dining facility was now a silent forest of men and women in camouflage, all standing, all facing the three sailors and the woman in the blue top. The laughter died in Davies's throat. A knot of confusion and fear tightened in his stomach. He and his friends looked around, their smirks fading, replaced by wide-eyed panic. The feeling in the room had changed from a public place to a hunter's trap, where they suddenly realized they were the hunted. The air was thick with unspoken threat. Hundreds of eyes were on them, not with open aggression, but with a cold, shared contempt that was far more terrifying. The main doors of the Trident mess hall swung open with a booming sound that echoed in the tomb-like silence. Major Evan Phillips strode in, his eyes burning with purpose. A powerful master sergeant walked beside him, his face grim. Their polished boots clicked on the floor, an unnervingly loud rhythm in the silent room. The standing Marines turned their heads to watch them pass, a subtle, almost invisible parting of the crowd. The major didn't slow down until he was standing directly in front of Abigail Carter. He completely ignored the three terrified sailors, treating them like they were simply objects. He looked at Abigail, taking in her civilian clothes, the tired but steady look in her eye. He brought his heels together with a clear click. He raised his right hand in the sharpest, most precise salute he had ever given. "Sergeant Carter," he said, his voice ringing with deep respect in the vast space. "It is an honor to see you on this base." For the first time, Abigail's calm seemed to shift. A flicker of surprise, of a long-sleeping instinct, crossed her face. Without a moment's thought, her training took over. She straightened, her posture snapping from relaxed civilian to the rigid attention of a Marine NCO, and returned the salute with equal precision. "Major Phillips," she replied, her voice steady. "Good to see you." Major Phillips lowered his salute and turned, his gaze finally falling upon Petty Officer Davies. The full weight of his rank, his authority, and his cold fury fell upon the sailor. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a sharp blade. "Petty Officer Davies," he began, the words perfectly spaced. "Do you have any idea who you are speaking to?" Davies stammered, unable to form a single clear word. He just shook his head, his face pale. "You are currently illegally holding and verbally attacking Sergeant Abigail Carter," the major said, his eyes boring into the sailor. "United States Marine Corps, retired. On her second tour in Anbar Province, Sergeant Carter's vehicle was struck by a roadside bomb. With a severe concussion and shrapnel tearing through her arm, she exited the vehicle under a hail of enemy machine gun fire. She single-handedly stopped an enemy ambush, saving the lives of her entire fire team. For that action, she was awarded the Purple Heart and the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, with a V for Valor. A shared breath was drawn by the watching Marines. They were no longer just standing for one of their own. They were standing for a hero. The major wasn't fit. He took a step closer to Davies, whose eyes were now wide with dawning horror. "This Marine has disarmed more bombs than you've had hot meals. She has proven herself expert with every weapon in an infantry platoon's arsenal. She has led Marines in combat. She has bled for the flag you wear on your shoulder. She has earned the right to eat in any dining hall in the entire Department of Defense. A right you tried to deny her because you saw a woman in a blue shirt and made a foolish, arrogant, and shameful assumption." He fell silent. The weight of his words settled over the room. The public proof of her worth was complete. The legend of the Dozer had just been told, chapter and verse, in front of hundreds of active duty service members. Major Phillips turned his head slightly toward the Master Sergeant. "Master Sergeant, please escort these sailors to their command. Master Chief's office. I will be calling him personally in 5 minutes, to make sure he understands the full seriousness of their behavior. Their careers in the United States Navy are now subject to my official review." The Master Sergeant simply nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. He signaled to the three sailors, who looked like they were about to be sick. They moved stiffly, like robots, and were led away, the silence of the mess hall following them out the door. With the trouble gone, Major Phillips turned back to Abigail, his expression softening. "Sergeant, on behalf of this command, I am deeply sorry you had to go through that." Abigail looked at the major, then around at the many faces, at the silent, unwavering wall of Marines still standing at attention for her. A deep, unfamiliar emotion swelled in her chest.
"It isn't about me, sir," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This was never about me. It's about making sure the next person who walks in here, whether they're a Marine, a sailor, an airman, or a soldier, is judged by their character and their service, not by what they look like or what they're wearing. The standard is the standard. It's for everyone." Her words echoed, a perfect statement of the values she had lived by her entire career. It wasn't about lowering expectations. It was about applying them fairly to all. As she spoke, her mind drifted back, not to the chaos of battle, but to a quiet, dusty moment long after the fighting had ended. A grizzled colonel, his face a map of sun and stress, stood before her. The air was still thick with the smell of the explosion. He held the small combat action ribbon in his hand. He didn't give a long speech. He just looked her in the eye, his gaze filled with a respect that went beyond rank, and pinned the ribbon to her stained and torn uniform. "You did good, Sergeant," was all he'd said. It was all that was needed. The ribbon wasn't a prize. It was a recognition, a piece of shared history written in gunpowder and sacrifice. The days that followed brought quiet but important changes on the base. Major Phillips kept his word. A mandatory training session on proper conduct and preventing harassment was put in place for everyone. The base-wide rules for ID checks were made clearer and reissued with a special note about treating contractors and veterans with respect. In the Trident mess hall, a new plaque was placed near the entrance, its brass letters gleaming, "Dedicated to all who have served, a place of respect for every warrior, past and present." About a week later, Abigail was browsing the aisles of the base store, picking up a few things on her way home. She turned a corner and almost bumped into a sailor coming the other way. It was Davies. He was alone, and the arrogant strut was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out look. He seemed smaller without his friends and his bluster. He saw her and froze. For a moment he looked like he might run. Instead, he took a deep breath, stood up straight, and walked toward her, stopping a respectful distance away. "Sergeant Carter," he began, his voice barely a whisper. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Ma'am, there's no excuse for how I acted. It was dishonorable, and I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry for what I said and did to you." Abigail looked at him, her expression unreadable. She saw not the arrogant bully from the mess hall, but a humbled young man who had learned a life-changing lesson. "Your apology is a start, petty officer," she said, her tone professional, not unkind. "What you do with it is what matters now. Learn from it. When you see one of your sailors, one of your peers starting down that same path, you stop them. You teach them better. That's how you can begin to make it right." He finally looked up, meeting her gaze. He saw no lingering anger, only a clear and firm expectation. He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am, I will." She gave him a brief nod in return and continued with her shopping, leaving him standing there in the aisle, a man who had faced a hero and been given not revenge, but a small chance at making things right. This story highlights the deep respect and bond among those who have served, especially when courage and honor are truly recognized.